All right, so let's continue our examples of arrays and how they are being used with a few more examples or a few more programs. So excuse me. So this one is called rolling the die and this is the one that is using the random numbers. So what it's doing is it writes a main method and it creates an array called frequency with the size 7. Okay, and what it's trying to do is create random numbers. And remember what we saw the last time with random numbers, you have your seed. So when it says next int 6, so there are 6 phases to it and they would like to start it from 1. So if you roll the dice, you can get a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4, 5 and 6. So every time you run this random number and whatever value that you get, so if you, let's say you get 2, okay, then it's going to store it in my frequency of 2. So in my second element, I'm going to store that value. So every time I create a random number, I get a value, let's say 1, I'm going to store it in my element as 1. I roll it again, I get another 1, I'm going to increment my element in 1 to 2. I roll it again, I get a 5, I'm going to put it in my fifth element as 1. I roll it again, I get another 5, I'm going to make it 2. So that's what it's doing is in this line number 8, it is actually going through, so it starts with a roll of 1, is the roll less than 100, it's going to do it 100 times, so we're going to generate 100 numbers, but every time I get a number, I would store it in that frequency. All right, and then I'm going to say system out, and then this is again my formatting, printf %s %10s, so you need that space, phase and frequency. So my phase is going to say either a 1 and how many times it happened. Okay, if it is 2, how many times it happened. Okay, and then you write another for statement where you say phase equals 1, phase less than frequency dot length, phase plus plus, and this is where you're going to print your phase and frequency of the phase. So that's my element that I'm storing. All right, so I'm going to run my roll die and it says it doesn't like something here. It probably has too many. Yes. So it said I had 1, the phase 1 17 times, phase 2 18 times, 3 17 times, 4 12 times, 5 15 times, and 6 21 times. So that's however how many times I got each of those phases. Now this is the part okay, make sure you understand this because you're going to see this thing being utilized a lot. Now the same thing you can do when you do your grade. Now in your grade you're not going to do a random number, but you're going to define a frequency, and if you say okay, I want to see how many people got this number, you can do that. Okay, but this is how they're keeping a track of how many times it's creating that number. And then of course your for statement that would print the phase as to 1 through 6, that's your seed, and then how many times it happened. Question here? We're good? Okay. Okay, let's take a look at this one, which is very, very similar to what you see over here. So let's take a look at this one. So this particular program is trying to show a poll that they had conducted with the students. So you have a student poll and you have your responses. So you created an int responses, but then this is a hard-coded value. right? So you can always make it a little more interactive and say, okay, how many polls do you want to collect? And you tell the user, what your values are going to be. It's 1 through 5. That's basically what it's doing. Okay, 1 through 5, and you can select 1 if you like it the most. If you select 5, you don't like it at all, so you can select some of that. And then you define a frequency. Okay, and again you can go from 1 through 5, so that's why you have a 6 here. So here's your answer. So every time, so for int answer equals 0, answer less than the response length. So it is actually going to go through this array and see how many times people have inputted 1 or 2 or 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so they're going to go through it, and then they're going to take that value and store it in your frequency. So see how it is using the same concept. So you have one array, you're storing all your values, and then you define another array called frequency, and you store or count the number of values that you had actually inputted in the first one. So if I had inputted 1, 1, 2, 3, about 3 times, so now my frequency in my element 1, I would have 3. Okay, now this is also within a try-catch statement. So let's see how that works. So I say, when I'm going through this for loop, I'm going to run this frequency analyzer, put it in my try block. So this is where I'm trying to count and see if students have inputted response 1 through 5. Okay, but if they don't, then say, okay, then this is how I'm going to run my catch. So if they don't match, then I'm going to say catch array index out of bound exception, and this is an object called E. So it already has a method, a name, or a statement in there. You say system out println E. So if you see anything other than 1 through 5, then you're going to catch this exception, write the message and say system out printf responses D, okay, what the response was, and then the answer to that response. So it not only tells you where in this array you have the wrong response, but also the response. All right, and then it does a system out println rating and frequency. Okay, and how do you calculate your rating and frequency? You run a for loop again, starting with rating, the frequency length, and then printing out the rating and the frequency. Same thing that you have done with your face and the number of times you got it, right? So for loop, going through my, so I'm going through, this is my frequency array, and this one is my response array. So 2 separate arrays. So one is your response array, one is your frequency array, and then I'm going through my response and my frequency to show what I'm getting. So if I run this, see what this one does. System out println E. Okay, E is saying this is my out of bound exception, but I did not crash the program. I said, okay, somebody input a 15, and this is actually stored in the 19th element, but then the rating and the frequency. So people put in 1 3 times, 2 4 times, 3 8 times, 4 2 times, and 5 2 times. So they're collecting or analyzing the result of the poll through this. Can you not add a bar chart to this? You could. You saw the bar chart from there. Run it to this and print out the stars so you can actually tell visually which one was the most, or what was the most response that the student put in. All right, let's continue on, and I'm going to go down a little further. Let's see. It's called array manipulation. Create a new class. Okay. Remember what I was talking about earlier, that what you did so far is you created some array and you saw how you can go and manipulate the values within the array. You can do some calculation. We only did some very simple sum, addition, and some frequency counter, but you can always do averages and low, high, and all that stuff. Now I also talked about array list, where you can now use some of the methods that are already written in the array class. Okay, only thing you had to do was bring in this library at the top, right? Because the compiler does not know where it's located at, so it just brings in the library with the import statement, and now it knows, okay, if I come across any of those methods, then this is where I need to go back and look and reference. So let's go through the program. So what I'm doing here is defining my class called array manipulation, and then you have your main method, and I define a double array. Okay, so double array, and these are my values. Now another question that sometimes comes in Java tests: when you define a double element or a double array, okay, the element value that you have, can that be double as well? Which means if I create a double array, and I'm calling it double array, and what's the size? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So I have 8.4, 9.3, 8.2, 7.9, and 3.4. What I mean is these element values, they would never be double. They would still be integer, right? So this is still going to be 0, this is still going to be 1, this is still going to be 2, 3, and 4. You follow me? So your element, remember, this is basically signifying or telling me where to go look in that array to extract that value 8.4. Okay, all right. So what I'm doing here is I'm calling this sort method. Okay, and this sort method is actually associated with this arrays class, and I'm passing this double array. So I don't really need to know how to do the sorting. You can write your own sort method, but just by calling it, I can do a sort. and then I say system out printf the double array, and now I'm writing my for method. So here is another for method a little differently that we are using. So it says for double value. So this is a variable called value that I just declared and called it double. And then you have this colon and then double array. See how you're writing? So this is just my array. So what it's doing is it is basically going through every single element of the double array. I don't need to say the size anymore. Okay, so basically there is no counter. It just knows that I need to go to this array and go through every single element, store the values, those elements that once they go through, it's going to store it in value and just print it out. So this is a shorter form of this for statement. Now it can be used in cases like this where you do not need a counter. Okay, because the only thing I'm doing is going through it and extracting the value out. So I can also write my for statement like this. Now let's continue on. I have an int filled int array new int 10. So I'm creating another array, but look what I see. I say arrays.fill filled array 7. So it actually tells you how many you want to fill. So these are all methods that are already written with array class. Okay, then there is an array copy that you can do. So not only can you take an array, you can fill it, you can use methods to say, okay, I want to copy up to 7 elements. Okay, so there are different kinds of methods that you can create with this. So one is your sort, the other one is your fill, the other one is your array copy. You can even use an array.equal, so it actually compares two arrays. Okay, so you just call that method, pass those arrays, it tells you, okay, the value in this array and the value in this array are exactly the same. Okay, so different kinds of things that you can do. You can do a binary search. Okay, again, I don't want you to know all the methods as to what they're doing in the methods, but just see how they're being used. So depending upon what is it that you're trying to get done, you can actually find methods that are already written in the array class. Okay, and then they also did some binary search, and then they wrote some if and else location, and then they did a display of an array. Okay, so if I run my program here, so initially the double array 0.2, 3.4, 7.9, 8.4, 9.3, you filled it with this value through 7, then you defined two different copies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you made a copy of the first array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you compared between these two, and the first one said it's not equal this, found 5 at element 4 int in int array, and then you were looking for the 8763, which is not found in that array. So all these different kinds of array methods that you used in that program. And I think I'm getting pretty close to my okay. I'm going to open one of these things. Now again, we can never get away from our objects and our classes and objects. So let's take a look at this one first. So in this one, I have public class card, and then I have two private string. One is face, one is suite, and these are some of the faces I have. This is my constructor, card, and a card suite, and then card face, and card switch. So this is something that you have seen before. So you're basically the two private variables that you defined. When you use it with a new constructor, then this is how it's going to be stored. You're using this string method where basically it's going to return this statement right here. Let's see how this has been used. So this is my card. So when I try my deck of cards, so this is my deck of cards, and here are my two. One is a random number of cards is 52. Here is what I create my deck and my current card. So more of my constructor here. This is my string, which is all the faces and the hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. Running my for statement here, doing a count, and then I'm writing my own method called shuffle. So really the point I'm trying to show over here is, you saw how we had used some of the array list, but you can also write your own method to go through and do the shuffle and use whatever you have learned before. Okay, so, and then this is my test. This is where I would have I would create my object. So here is my deck of cards, new, and then I call my shuffle. See how it's using my name of the class that I had used, dot shuffle. So I know that that shuffle is in my other program. I have a for statement. It goes through my deal card, and it basically, it prints out in 4 columns. So it goes, spade of this, heart of this, up to 4, and then it goes to the next line. So basically this, instead of having the result print out all as one line, it's going to do 4 and then come back to the next one, print another 4, come back to the next one, print another 4. But it is going to go through, remember, since you have 52 cards, so once you shuffle, basically what it's showing you is you're writing a program where once you shuffle and you start showing, it's going to go through 52 cards and catch every one depending upon that random number that you had generated. All right? All right, so that kind of concludes our array and array list chapter. There is one little thing that I did not go through, is where they showed you how you can use arrays and pass the array as a whole through a method, or array individual elements. Let me see if I can find that one. That was the only thing that we did not come across. No. I just pointed out to from the book here. Okay, so this is the one that I was talking about, passing arrays to methods. So you can actually do two things. You can pass an entire array. Okay, so if you create this double array, you can pass this entire array, or you can pass the individual elements of that array. Okay, so the template is a little different. So if you're trying to pass an entire array, this is how you do it: modify array and pass the entire array. Okay, so if I go back to my modify array. See what it's, the way it shows it, int array2. So it tells you that we are trying to pass an array which is of the type integer, but this is the entire array that I'm passing. Okay, so array2 is the entire array, the total array that I'm trying to pass. However, you can also pass the individual element of an array. So the way you would set up the template is public static void modify element int element. You see, you do not use the square sign anymore. So whenever you see these square brackets, you know it's the entire element, that entire array that has been passed. But if you don't see it, it's the individual element. And when you pass that one, so this is modify element. So say this is modify element. So then you're actually saying array and then passing the element that you're trying to pass. So now I'm talking about only that one element that I'm passing. All right, it's pretty simple. With all the methods that you have done, and I just wanted to let you know that it can be done both ways. You don't have to pass the entire array if you're only trying to pass only one element of it. All right, that pretty much concludes this chapter over here. As far as your assignment goes, I think I'm still going to use some of that creativity thing, where I'm going to have you guys, you can use any of the examples from the book. I've kind of, as I'm going through it, I was trying to give you some hints about when you're trying to create your program, how you can implement some of those things into your programs. So you're going to see something come up, and I think I'm about I think that's about it. I lost.